Chris Mackowski. I'm exploring the road from the Civil War to the Civil Rights, and I'm excited today to talk to one of my very best friends in the whole wide universe, Dr. Breea
Hey,
Willingham. How you doing?
I am great. I'm great. It started snowing, so we're expecting 8 to 13 inches of snow. So
Ooh.
yeah, I'm good. I got my wine, so I'm all set.
Snowed in with only one bottle of wine? That's not going to be enough.
No, no, not just one. Yeah.
So this semester, I'm teaching a class called The Civil Rights Movement and the Media, and it's a class that Breea actually developed years and years ago. And so I thought I'd take a second and talk with her a little bit about why she came up with the class and what she got out of it, and maybe what students might also be able to get out of it as well. Um, where did the idea come from for you?
So I had gone on a civil rights immersion trip, and it was, see, I think I was only my second year there at Bonna's, and it was through the ministry office. I forget what it's called, but this is when Cheryl Parrish was there, and she had taken a group of students and three faculty advisors to attend this trip, and we had gone down to uh, Montgomery, and it was this national, so I didn't even know what it was. She was just like, hey, you want to go on this civil rights trip? I was like, all right, cool. So it was sponsored by a university out of California, actually, and I forget the name. I think it was Sanford. But anyway, so we go on this trip, and it's colleges and universities from across the country, and the goal was just to learn about civil rights, the civil rights movement, where it actually took place. So we started in Montgomery, and we were in the church where the four little girls were bombed. So we did that tour, and what they did was they split us up into groups, and so half of the group went to Selma to walk the bridge, and I was with the group that stayed in Montgomery, and we toured different sites within Montgomery, and then we also visited the Civil Rights Museum that's there. And it was just, I don't know, it is one of those things where you had to actually be there to really get a feel for the movement that was happening in the room, so that when we were all together and everyone would talk about their different experiences. And I was actually kind of jealous that I didn't get to walk the bridge.
Remember when I
But
walked the bridge? It like gave me chills to walk the bridge. You
yeah,
know.
yeah. And then there were several guest speakers, people who had either actually walked the bridge originally, and other key players in the civil rights movement. And I remember being there and thinking, more students need to know about this. And I also remember thinking, why isn't anyone really talking about the role that the media played in all of this? And I remember one student from a different university asking the question, why don't we learn this stuff in school? And so it's like, ding, 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 idea, course, the civil rights movement in the media. And it, obviously with my media background, that was part of the motivation for that. But it was really to thinking about how the Black press in particular, they were the key players, one of the key players, I'll say, in the entire movement. And then the power of the media when Emmett Till was lynched, and how it wasn't until he was murdered that people up north really understood and got to see what was happening to Black people in the South. And for me, it's just the power of the media, the power of images, the power of words, all of those things. And how the media was really I'll say part of the driving force behind the movement, and pushing it forward in a way, because now more people were learning about it. And then too, and thinking about during slavery, when it was illegal for Black people to be able to read and to write, and all of these underground schools that slaves created so that they can teach the children how to read and write, and just about all of that power of language, the power of literacy, the power of education, and how the media then particularly the Black press, let me just be specific about that, and how it's almost like, when we ask who gets to tell the Black story.
Mhm.
Okay. And during that time, it was the Black press who was telling our stories, because the mainstream media was not particularly interested. And you still see a lot of that playing out today, right? As far as how mainstream media treats stories about Black people, but that's a discussion for a whole other time.
Well, and that's actually, and one of the things that I've been encouraging my students is like, we're going to focus on the civil rights, but I want you to think about how that resonates today and what connections do you draw. And I'm trying very hard to not draw explicit connections because I want them to have their own light bulb moments. But yeah, I mean, you talk about the resonance today, you can see
Yes.
lots of
Oh
parallels.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And so, well, you remember when I was there, um, I don't know. Yeah, you came to the talk when I was there, I don't know, a few years ago. And
Mhm.
I had that image of Mike Brown up on the screen, and I was saying, likening it to a lynching, as a modern day lynching. And these were some of the images that, we're seeing now, and these images that people saw back during, lynching days. So kind of that same difference. But anyway, so the Black press was really, owning our stories, and telling our stories. And there was power in that. So all of that, was going through my mind when I was on that trip. And I was like, this needs to be a story. Excuse me, this needs to be a course, because it's necessary, particularly for students in journalism, in communication, in any type of any portion of the media that they go into. It's good to know that history, as as a history buff, because everything is connected. And so, as you were just saying, what we're seeing today, as far as how the mainstream media portrays particularly race and crime, that's one of the things that I talk about in my classes as well, is how the media constructs criminals, and I put criminals in air quotes, how they construct who we perceive to be as, the bad guys versus the good guys, and all of that. So it's all connected. Yeah.
And that sort of gets into the subtleties and intricacies of how stories are constructed, because we sort of assume like, oh, a news event happens and the media covers it, and so then we're going to see the coverage, but there's actually a lot that goes into what kind of coverage, who's going to report the story, what images are they showing, who they talk to, and
Yeah.
a lot of decision making goes into that.
Yeah, and also the story is filtered so many times before it actually gets to the public. And and this is my experience as 10 years as a working journalist. Even before I would leave the newsroom, sometimes an editor would say, make sure you get so and so to say XYZ, or try to get them to say this. And so an editor who's not even out in the field already has it in his or her mind what the story is, and then tries to get the reporter then, when they go out into the field, to construct that narrative. And so again, like you said, depending on who's going out, I always tell students that objectivity does not exist whatsoever. So I could give a room full of 30 students the exact same assignment, and everyone is going to come back with a different version of the story, because we all approach a story from our own biases, from our own positionality, from our own whatever. And so all of that is going to come into play when we are reporting a story, or doing any kind of academic research or whatever. And so objectivity, let that go, it doesn't exist. And so when you're dealing with the media, and particularly with race and crime, then that's why we see so many disparities in the way that Black people are covered, particularly when they are victims of crime, and particularly when they are suspects of crime. So, and then, look at Breonna Taylor, right? Her coverage, she wasn't getting as much coverage as when George Floyd was murdered. So it's a balance, not just with race, but also with gender. An imbalance, I should say. Yeah.
And one of the things that we talked about in the first couple of weeks of class is this notion that the press has this responsibility, and by choosing to cover a story to begin with, makes it a story or not. And a lot of the students were kind of amazed that, particularly in the North, people didn't realize race was an issue. It's because the papers just weren't covering it as such.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why the Emmett Till story. So it wasn't until the New York Times sent a reporter down south to cover it. That's how people up north
wow.
Oh snap, this is really happening. This is really a thing. And and why his mom decided to run that picture on the cover of Life, open casket. So it is it's important that that there is representation, a diverse representation within those newsrooms, because that's how these types of stories are going to get told.
Now, I want to go back to something you talked about a second ago, where you went to Montgomery and you walked the ground and you visited the sites. And I told my own students that's kind of how I got interested in history, was walking on the battlefields. And the power of place was really transformational for me and really motivational for me. You want to talk a little bit more about how being in the footsteps of history really kind of opens up your ability to explore it a little bit?
Yeah, it's something about so it's like you can read about it, you can watch documentaries, you can do all of that stuff from the comfort of your own home, but you get a feeling of, oh, that's really moving, or I'm really touched by that. But it's not until you're actually there that you really understand what it means to be moved by something. And being there, it's almost as if it was almost as if you could still feel the spirits, particularly when we were in the church. It just felt like, you can, like I said, it was moving so much that it felt like those little girls were inside of me. And and it was just like one of those, oh man, like kind of moments, that gut punch moment, and we all know what it feels like to be punched in the gut. And so it's like, it was very visceral, the feeling there. And I remember too being in the museum, and they had KKK robe and the whole nine. So of course it's encased and everything. And it was the red one, right? And so yeah. I remember standing in front of that and just staring at it. And I could feel the evil. It was just, and it's really hard for me to really articulate it to this day. And this was back in, I think, like 2007. So it's been a while, but I can still remember what it felt like to stand there and to feel that evil. Because when you look into the, like the holes in the hood, it's almost as if you can see some eyes staring back at you, right? And so that was very jarring for me, because it was okay, so this is just a showcase, right? And if I can feel it with no physical body, under that hood, I cannot imagine what it was actually like to come into physical contact with people who were wearing the hoods. And so that was one of the moments that really, really, I think to this day still resonates with me. And then and this was a totally unrelated trip, but I had also some years ago gone to Nashville. No, excuse me, not Nashville. Where the Lorraine Hotel is.
Oh, in Memphis. Yeah.
Thank you, Memphis, where the good barbecue is too.
You
So
were walking in Memphis.
yeah, so went to the Lorraine Hotel and just did that whole tour, and it was just like, man. So you went there, right? Didn't you go?
Actually, I have not been to the Lorraine.
Oh, I thought you went. Okay, so they have a whole replica of Dr. King's room, and of course you can stand on the actual balcony, and then looking across the street. And then the second part of the tour is you actually go across the street, and there's a replica of the room where what's the dude's name that killed him?
I can't remember off the top.
Yeah.
Since you're quizzing me, I can't remember.
That white guy.
Nobody said there'd be a quiz. Come
I know,
on.
right? That white guy. So it's a replica of his room too, and you stand in it and you see the vantage point from when he shot out the. It was just like, yo,
Yeah.
that was a mind fuck. So
I had that same experience when I stood in the carport where Medgar Evers was shot, and you can see the little knoll where the guy shot him from, and
wow.
it was just chilling. I mean, literally standing right there where his blood had
Yeah.
been spilled, and it was like, wow.
Yeah, it's like that. You can feel the spirit moving. It's just and then one other example of place and being in walking in footsteps. I visited Auschwitz several years ago. This was when I was on the world tour.
Yeah.
Remember?
I wanted to get T-shirts made up for you that said, "Where?"
No, it wasn't 15. It was I think 2013 or something, 12 or whatever. So yeah, and I remember a friend of mine who had gone some years before, and she told me, she's like, I can't even explain it, you'll see. And it wasn't until I got there I was like, oh, now I see what she meant, why she couldn't explain it, because whew, I mean, that was so heavy. I think that was probably heavier than when I visited the civil rights places. That is just oof, to literally be where so many people were murdered. It was just slaughter, whatever description we want to use. It was I can't even explain it. Like my friend said, it's just something you have to experience. But I do remember, leaving that tour, and some of the people that I was with, we had no words. Like the whole trip back to our hotel, we were just couldn't even articulate it. I remember just going to my room and just taking a shower because I had to wash it off. Like it was just heavy. So it's like taking the expression "walk a mile in my shoes," taking that quite literally. And because you really do not understand unless you have either experienced it firsthand yourself, or you are in the actual place where all of these atrocities in history making events have happened. Because until you do that, reading about it, which is great, of course, researching about it, which is great, of course, but until you are actually there, there's going to be something really missing from the narrative that you are trying to create.
Using that expression about walking a mile in your shoes, and it makes me think of just the idea of good old-fashioned shoe leather reporting, where you have to
Yes.
get up out of your chair and go
Mhm.
walk the story
Yes.
and do it.
Yes.
Now we are reading The Race Beat, so that's the book that we have. If people
Yeah.
can't get up and go do it, tell me about your experience with the textbook.
Geez, I
I remember you telling me that your students didn't like it a whole lot.
yeah, they thought it was too dense.
Okay.
And it was hard for them to get into it, because it's not a textbook.
Right.
Right. There are no review questions at the end. There's no summary that you can flip through at the end to try and get the key points on your way to as you're walking to class. It's a book that you actually have to read.
Yeah. And that's what I've tried to tell them. Like, you got to read it. The course is premised on, like, you got to read the reading material.
And I remember actually, you remember Leisha Ashbacker?
Yeah.
She had the whole DVD set. She found CD set. She said, I found the CD so I could listen to it. I couldn't read that book. I said, hey, whatever works. So somewhere I actually have the CDs somewhere. They're probably in my office. But the book for me, obviously, because I'm a book nerd as you are as well. I enjoyed the book. I was like really into it because I thought it was so thoroughly done. It was just, it's been over 10 years since I read the book, but from what I remember, I just remember it was really thorough, and it really, in the best way that it could, break it down like piece by piece. I mean, I don't know how much more specific, I guess is the best one I can think of right now.
Well, and I'm trying to take it slow, so we're doing like a chapter class period, so we've got pretty isolated chunks. For viewers, listeners, the book's called The Race Beat, and it won the Pulitzer Prize for history, and I think it's a fantastic,
it's a great book. And that's the way you like, so to use it for class, that's the best way, and that's how I did it. It's like chapter by chapter, and I would assign, I think, if I recall correctly, I would assign different students a different chapter.
Well, we're doing the same thing.
So, yeah. Okay. So that's the best way to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
So before we wrap up, what do you hope students taking a class like this are able to get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, the power, not just the power of storytelling, but the momentum that is behind good storytelling, and the momentum that the Black press in particular, because that's what I focus on a lot, the power of that press in keeping Black people informed about this movement, keeping them safe, and well, to the extent that they could, right? And that, particularly when we're talking about the Black press versus mainstream media, there is something to who gets to tell the Black story, or who gets to tell, and then fill in the blank, whose ever story. I am a firm believer in people with lived experiences being the true subject matter experts. And despite the best of intentions of, us outsiders, that the story is not as authentic as when it's coming from the person with that lived experience. And so that was, and I guess in looking back, how I taught the class and what my vision was, I don't think I was able to really articulate it back then in the way that I am now. But that's the essence of it. And so, and also to understand that when we talk about the civil rights movement, number one, it's not just Dr. King and Rosa Parks. The narrative that they sell you in elementary school, middle school, through your whole K-12 experience is it's not the whole story. And a lot of times it's inaccurate. And also, number two, that the civil rights movement is not over. There is this false belief that, oh, Dr. King took care of that. No, I mean, he's one of the key players, obviously, but this movement still continues. And so, I would say those two things, and question one more thing, and question everything, especially the media, question everything, because the story that they are telling you, I guarantee, is not the whole story.
Going back to what you said about that lived experience, and here I am, I'm a middle-aged white dude teaching a class in the civil rights movement, and I wasn't alive back then, and I haven't had to go through those same sorts of experiences as a white man. So being able to find those other voices, I think, is really important. And approaching the course through an honest sense of inquiry is sort of my basis on this.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can figure out.
Yeah, and and learning with your students. I mean, that I think in any class that we are teaching, I think that is part of the goal too, is to learn with, not just stand up in front of the room or on a Zoom and just speak at, just learning with them.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, particularly with race, which is a scary topic for a lot of people. People are like, and take that honest sense of like, let's just learn something, see what we can learn. I think it's really important.
Exactly.
Breea, I'm always glad to have the chance to catch up. Usually if Breea and I are talking, it's usually with some beers in front of us and lots of laughter. So I'm so glad to see you, and thank you so much for inspiring me to pick up your mantle and teach this class.
I'm glad to see you're doing it, like, because it's been, how long since it's been taught?
Since the last time you did. So
I thought Vecchio did it once before he left.
I don't think he did.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, wow. So
yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cheers to you, my friend, and good luck.
You too. Thank you.